Egyptian mummies have no business being inside the Grand Canyon, but in 1909, the Smithsonian published a report describing exactly that, an expedition into a cave system 1,400 feet down the canyon wall that uncovered sarcophagi, mummies sitting cross-legged, gold urns, and hieroglyphics carved into American rock. The cave stretched over 800 feet into the cliff, hundreds of rooms, copper instruments harder than steel, a shrine to Osiris, a complex estimated to house 50,000 people, buried inside Arizona. The Smithsonian sent a team, took 700 photographs, cataloged everything, then they denied it ever happened. The explorer, erased. The archaeologist, erased. The photographs, gone. And that section of the Grand Canyon was quietly restricted by the government. The only reason any of this is on the record is because of a single newspaper article. April 5, 1909. The Arizona Gazette runs a front-page story, not buried in the back, not filed as speculation, front page. The headline describes an immense cavern discovered in the Grand Canyon and explorations already underway. The man at the center of it was G.E. Kincaid. According to the Gazette, Kincaid had spent 30 years working for the Smithsonian. He wasn't a treasure hunter, he wasn't some amateur with a theory. He was an institutional man on an institutional expedition, traveling alone down the Colorado River from Green River, Wyoming, in a wooden boat. And somewhere around 42 miles upriver from El Tovar Crystal Canyon, on the eastern wall, he spotted something, a shelf of rock about 2,000 feet above the riverbed, partially concealing what looked like a cave entrance. He climbed 1,400 feet straight up the cliff face with nothing but his hands and whatever footholds the canyon offered. What he found behind that shelf wasn't a cave, it was a corridor, cut into the rock, stretching deeper into the cliff than any natural formation should, and the walls weren't raw stone, someone had carved into them. Kincaid didn't sell the story, he didn't go public, he reported it up the chain to the Smithsonian, the way an institutional man would, and the Smithsonian responded immediately. They sent Professor S.A. Jordan, one of their anthropologists, to take full control of the site. That's when things get strange, because what Jordan's team found inside that corridor had no business being on this continent. Professor Jordan's team entered the corridor and started mapping. What they found wasn't a tomb, it was a complex. The main passageway ran over 850 feet deep into the cliff. Off that central corridor, rooms branched in every direction. The expedition explored dozens of them, and the article makes clear they didn't reach the end. This wasn't a burial site, it was built for the living, granaries packed with seeds, storerooms, spaces that looked like barracks. The Gazette's report estimated the complex could hold 50,000 people. 50,000, inside a cliff wall in Arizona, in a structure that, according to every established timeline of the Americas, could not have been built by anyone who was supposed to be here. But the artifacts were worse than the architecture. Gold urns in several rooms. Copper tools hardened to a level that no known civilization in the pre-Columbian Americas had achieved. Tablets carved with writing that no one on Jordan's team could identify. Not Native American, not Spanish, not anything that belonged on this continent. And that was before they reached the central shrine, a single chamber, deeper inside the cliff than any of the others. Jordan's team entered and found a figure carved from stone, life-sized, sitting cross-legged, a lotus flower held in each hand. The lotus, sacred symbol of Egyptian religion, of Osiris, of the Nile, sitting in the dark, 1,000 feet inside the Grand Canyon. If that statue is real, then someone carried an Egyptian religious tradition 7,000 miles across an ocean and a continent into a cliff in Arizona and built a shrine to it underground, thousands of years before Columbus ever left port. Every one of these artifacts was cataloged, every room was photographed, over 700 images taken under formal Smithsonian protocols, which makes what happened next very difficult to explain. Because within years of this report, every trace of this expedition had been scrubbed clean. Now, here's where this story should fall apart. G.E. Kincaid does not appear in any Smithsonian employment record. Neither does Professor S.A. Jordan. No payroll, no correspondence, no field reports. As far as the Smithsonian is concerned, these men never existed. The article itself has problems. It refers to the Smithsonian Institute, but the actual name is the Smithsonian Institution. That's a basic error, the kind a reporter wouldn't make if they'd had any real contact with the organization. And no other newspaper in the country picked up the story. Not one. The Arizona Gazette itself never published a follow-up. The biggest archaeological discovery in North American history, and it generated exactly one article, then silence. If this were a trial, the defense would rest right there. Fabrication, case closed. Except it's not that clean. The article doesn't read like a hoax. It runs over 5,000 words with specific measurements. 854 feet for one passageway, 634 for another, room-by-room descriptions, artifact inventories. That's an unusual amount of precision for something a reporter supposedly invented on a slow news day. Hoaxes tend to be vague. This article is the opposite. It's so detailed it reads like a field report that someone handed to the Gazette and said, "Print this." And then there's the part that nobody on either side can explain away. The section of the Grand Canyon where this cave was reported is a restricted government zone. No civilian access, no hiking permits, no exceptions. That restriction is real, it's current, and it predates the modern internet debate about this article by decades. And the geological formations inside that restricted zone? They have names, official names, on official maps. Isis Temple, Tower of Set, Osiris Temple, Tower of Ra, Cheops Pyramid, Buddha Cloister, an entire cluster of Grand Canyon landmarks carrying the names of Egyptian and Eastern religious figures, sitting directly on top of the area where a newspaper reported finding Egyptian artifacts underground in 1909. Nobody has ever adequately explained why. Here's the thing about the Smithsonian denying this expedition. It's not the first time. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Smithsonian was the gatekeeper of American archaeology. If something was found in American soil, the Smithsonian decided what it meant. They decided what got published, they decided what got displayed, and they decided what disappeared into storage and never came back out. This wasn't some rogue department, this was institutional design. The Smithsonian's role in that era was to build a coherent story of the Americas, who was here, when they arrived, and what they were capable of. Anything that didn't fit that story was a problem, and problems were handled quietly. The Grand Canyon expedition doesn't look like an anomaly when you see it next to everything else. An explorer makes a discovery. He follows protocol, reports it to the institution takes control, sends their own team, documents everything, and then nothing. The explorer has no further record. The lead researcher has no further record. 700 photographs vanish into an institution that catalogs millions of objects with obsessive precision. 700 photographs, not 7, not 70. 700 images taken under formal excavation protocols by a team the Smithsonian sent and supervised. Those photographs either exist in a storage facility somewhere, or someone made a deliberate decision to destroy the evidence of a discovery that would have forced the rewriting of every textbook on pre-Columbian America. There is no third option. The records weren't lost in a fire. The Smithsonian doesn't lose things. They have over 155 million objects in their collections. They have storage facilities most people don't know exist. If the photographs are gone, they were made gone. And Kincaid and Jordan, two men who allegedly spent decades inside the institution, were made to have never existed at all. But there's one more layer to this, and it's the one that existed long before the newspaper, long before Kincaid, and long before the Smithsonian had any say in what counts as history. The Hopi people have an oral tradition that stretches back centuries. In that tradition, their ancestors didn't always live on the surface. They emerged from underground, and the place they emerged from, the place their origin story begins, is the Grand Canyon. This isn't something the Hopi developed in response to the 1909 article. This isn't internet folklore. This is a foundational narrative of one of the oldest continuously inhabited civilizations in North America, passed down for generations before anyone named Kincaid set foot in a boat. An indigenous civilization says their ancestors lived underground in the Grand Canyon. A newspaper article describes a massive underground complex discovered in the Grand Canyon. The Smithsonian erased the article's expedition from the record, and the government locked down the exact area where both stories converge. Each piece alone is dismissible, a legend, a newspaper, a bureaucratic gap, a coincidence on a map, but together they form a question that nobody, not the Smithsonian, not the skeptics, not the United States government, has ever been willing to answer in public. What is inside that canyon? The cave hasn't been excavated by any public institution since 1909. The restricted zone hasn't been opened. The photographs have never surfaced. And the Smithsonian's official position, after more than 100 years, is still that none of this ever happened. But the Arizona Gazette article is still in the archive. The geological formations still carry Egyptian names. The Hopi still tell the story of a world beneath the canyon. And somewhere behind a shelf of rock, 1,400 feet down a cliff wall that almost nobody is allowed to visit, there is either an empty cave or the discovery that rewrites human history. It's been over a century, and no one has been allowed to check.